It is with a heavy heart that I take up my pen to write these the last words in which I shall ever record the singular gifts by which my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes was distinguished. It was my intention to have stopped there, and to have said nothing of that event which has created a void in my life which the lapse of 2 years has done little to fill. My hand has been forced, however, by the recent letters in which Colonel James Moriarty defends the memory of his brother. I alone know the absolute truth of the matter, and I am satisfied that the time has come when no good purpose is to be served by its suppression. It may be remembered that after my marriage, the very intimate relations which had existed between Holmes and myself became to some extent modified. During the winter of that year and the early spring of 1891, I saw in the papers that he had been engaged by the French government upon a matter of supreme importance. It was with some surprise, therefore, that I saw him walk into my consulting room upon the evening of the 24th of April.
"Yes, I have been using myself up rather too freely,"
he remarked.
"I have been a little pressed of late. Have you any objection to my closing your shutters?"
"You are afraid of something."
"Well, I am."
"Off
air guns? I must apologize for calling so late, and I must further beg you to allow me to leave your house presently by scrambling over your back garden wall."
He held out his hand, and I saw in the light of the lamp that 2 of his knuckles were burst and bleeding.
"It is not an airy nothing, you see. Then it makes it the easier for me to propose that you should come away with me for a week to the continent."
"Where?"
"Oh, anywhere. It's all the same to me. You have probably never heard of Professor Moriarty."
"Ever."
There's the genius and the wonder of the thing. The man pervades London, and no one has heard of him. I tell you, Watson, in all seriousness, that if I could beat that man, if I could free society of him, I should feel that my own career had reached its summit. His career has been an extraordinary one. He is a man of good birth and excellent education. At the age of 21 he wrote a treatise upon the binomial theorem, which has had a European vogue. But the man had hereditary tendencies of the most diabolical kind. A criminal strain ran in his blood. He is the Napoleon of crime, Watson. He is the organizer of half that is evil and of nearly all that is undetected in this great city. He sits motionless, like a spider in the center of its web, but that web has 1,000 radiations, and he knows well every quiver of each of them. But the professor was fenced round with safeguards so cunningly devised that it seemed impossible to get evidence which would convict in a court of law. In 3 days, that is to say, on Monday next, matters will be ripe, and the professor, with all the principal members of his gang, will be in the hands of the police. This morning the last steps were taken, and 3 days only were wanted to complete the business. I was sitting in my room thinking the matter over, when the door opened and Professor Moriarty stood before me.
His appearance was quite familiar to me. He is extremely tall and thin, his forehead domes out in a white curve, and his 2 eyes are deeply sunken in his head.
"You have less frontal development than I should have expected,"
said he at last.
"It is a dangerous habit to finger loaded firearms in the pocket of one's dressing gown."
At his remark I drew the weapon out and laid it cocked upon the table. He still smiled and blinked, but there was something about his eyes which made me feel very glad that I had it there.
"You must drop it, Mr. Holmes,"
said he, swaying his face about.
"You really must, you know.
After Monday,
if you are clever enough to bring destruction upon me, rest assured that I shall do as much to you."
"You have paid me several compliments, Mr. Moriarty. Let me pay you one in return when I say that if I were assured of the former eventuality I would, in the interests of the public, cheerfully accept the latter. My dear Watson, Professor Moriarty is not a man who lets the grass grow under his feet. As I passed the corner, a 2-horse van furiously driven whizzed round and was on me like a flash. As I walked down Vere Street, a brick came down from the roof of one of the houses and was shattered to fragments at my feet. On my way I was attacked by a rough with a bludgeon. I knocked him down, and the police have him in custody, but I can tell you with the most absolute confidence that no possible connection will ever be traced. You will dispatch whatever luggage you intend to take by a trusty messenger unaddressed to Victoria tonight. In the morning you will send for a hansom, dash through the arcade, timing yourself to reach the other side at 9:15.
In the morning I obeyed Holmes's injunctions to the letter. A hansom was procured, and I drove immediately after breakfast to the Lowther Arcade, through which I hurried at the top of my speed. A brougham was waiting with a very massive driver wrapped in a dark cloak, whipped up the horse and rattled off to Victoria Station. My only source of anxiety now was the non-appearance of Holmes. The station clock marked only 7 minutes from the time when we were due to start. I returned to my carriage, where I found that the porter had given me my decrepit Italian friend as a traveling companion.
My dear Watson, you have not even condescended to say good morning?
I turned in uncontrollable astonishment. The aged ecclesiastic had turned his face towards me.
Every precaution is still necessary. I have reason to think that they are hot upon our trail. Ah, there is Moriarty himself. They set fire to our rooms last night. No great harm was done.
Good heavens, Holmes, this is intolerable.
My dear Watson, you evidently did not realize my meaning when I said that this man may be taken as being quite on the same intellectual plane as myself. What will he do?
What I should do?
Engage a special? We shall get out at Canterbury.
At Canterbury, therefore, we alighted, only to find that we should have to wait an hour before we could get a train to New Haven. Far away from among the Kentish woods there rose a thin spray of smoke. A minute later a carriage and engine could be seen flying along the open curve which leads to the station.
There he goes. There are limits, you see, to our friend's intelligence. It would have been a coup de maître had he deduced what I would deduce and acted accordingly.
On the Monday morning Holmes had telegraphed to the London police, and in the evening we found a reply waiting for us at our hotel. Holmes tore it open, and then with a bitter curse hurled it into the grate.
I might have known it! He has escaped! They have secured the whole gang with the exception of him. This man's occupation is gone. He is lost if he returns to London. If I read his character right, he will devote his whole energies to revenging himself upon me.
For a charming week we wandered up the valley of the Rhône, to Meiringen. But it was clear to me that never for one instant did Holmes forget the shadow which lay across him. Once, as we passed over the Gemmi, a large rock which had been dislodged from the ridge upon our right clattered down and roared into the lake behind us.
Your memoirs will draw to an end, Watson, upon the day that I crown my career by the capture or extinction of the most dangerous and capable criminal in Europe.
It was on the 3rd of May that we reached the little village of Meiringen. On the afternoon of the 4th we set off together, to pass the falls of Reichenbach. It is indeed a fearful place. The torrent, swollen by the melting snow, plunges into a tremendous abyss, from which the spray rolls up like the smoke from a burning house. We had turned to do so, when we saw a Swiss lad come running along it with a letter in his hand. It bore the mark of the hotel which we had just left. It appeared that within a very few minutes of our leaving, an English lady had arrived who was in the last stage of consumption. It would be a great consolation to her to see an English doctor. As I turned away I saw Holmes, with his back against a rock and his arms folded, gazing down at the rush of the waters. It was the last that I was ever destined to see of him in this world. Along this a man was, I remember, walking very rapidly. I could see his black figure clearly outlined against the green behind him. I reached Meiringen. Old Styler was standing at the porch of his hotel.
Well, I trust that she is no worse.
You did not write this. There is no sick Englishwoman in the hotel,
he cried. In a tingle of fear I was already running down the village street, and making for the path which I had so lately descended. There was Holmes's Alpine stock still leaning against the rock by which I had left him. But there was no sign of him, and it was in vain that I shouted. 2 lines of footmarks were clearly marked along the farther end of the path. There were none returning. A few yards from the end the soil was all ploughed up into a patch of mud. I found that it came from the silver cigarette case which he used to carry. As I took it up, a small square of paper upon which it had lain fluttered down onto the ground. Unfolding it, I found that it consisted of 3 pages torn from his note-book and addressed to me. It was characteristic of the man that the direction was precise, and the writing as firm and clear.
My dear Watson, I write these few lines through the courtesy of Mr. Moriarty, who awaits my convenience for the final discussion of those questions which lie between us. I am pleased to think that I shall be able to free society from any further effects of his presence, though I fear that it is at a cost which will give pain to my friends, and especially, my dear Watson, to you. Tell Inspector Patterson that the papers which he needs to convict the gang are in pigeonhole M, done up in a blue envelope and inscribed Moriarty.
An examination by experts leaves little doubt that a personal contest between the 2 men ended in their reeling over, locked in each other's arms. And there, deep down in that dreadful cauldron of swirling water and seething foam, will lie for all time the most dangerous criminal and the foremost champion of the law of their generation. The Swiss youth was never found again, and there can be no doubt that he was one of the numerous agents whom Moriarty kept in his employ. As to the gang, it will be within the memory of the public how completely the evidence which Holmes had accumulated exposed their organization, and how heavily the hand of the dead man weighed upon them. Of their terrible chief few details came out during the proceedings, and if I have now been compelled to make a clear statement of his career, It is due to those injudicious champions who have endeavored to clear his memory, by attacks upon him whom I shall ever regard as the best and the wisest man whom I have ever known.